Hi, welcome back. If you're new here, my name's Natalia, and today I wanted to do a quick overview on StoryGraph. If you have not heard of StoryGraph, it is a reading tracker app, and it is an app that I use basically every single day, and one of my favorite apps that I have on my phone. So I will go through just a high-level overview of what StoryGraph is. If you have used a reading tracker app, you'll be very familiar with the basic functionality. But I just want to go through what are some of my favorite things and things that I hope they will work on to improve in the future. So let's jump right in. Something to note is I do pay for the premium version. So something that I show might not be available to you if you are on the free version. The premium version is $50 a year. And I don't know if they'll actually do some sort of Black Friday sale, but it might be worth checking out if they do. So let's jump right in. I will be showing you how I use it on my phone as well as on a laptop via the browser. And I think these are probably the two most common ways that people use it. So I just want to show you side by side how that experience might look. So at a very high level, here's the homepage. You get the basic things of here are the books that you are reading. Here is your progress if you choose to track that. I personally do every time I finish reading either a paper book or on my Kindle, or I stopped listening to an audiobook, I'll go into the app and update where I stopped, and it just tracks, personally for me, I have it set up to track as the percentage of the overall book. So you can take a look at your current reading, and then as you scroll around, you'll see there's a bit of difference on the phone versus the browser, but basically you get to see your to read list, your read recently, any tags that you might have used for the books that are in your lists, any recommendations that StoryGraph has for you. I think this is a premium version feature, and a few other things here on the homepage. But let's dive into the top features that I personally absolutely love this app for. So number one, the stats page, and really the whole stats page. I fell in love with StoryGraph because I am a numbers nerd. So this was one of the most fun ways to not even just gamify my reading experience, because I read a fair amount every year, regardless of needing to gamify or not. But being able to see these numbers, being able to break down the data, see how much I read in January versus June versus October, be able to see the different genres that I read, and so much more. And then you add the community and the followers and the friends that you can have on top of that and see how your reading compares to others. And this is my favorite part of StoryGraph by far. It's just the numbers. A few of my favorite graphs on here. So at the very top, you can see the goal that you have set up if you choose to set one up, and how you're progressing towards that. I personally typically keep track of how many books I have read, and I had never really closely looked at number of pages or number of hours of audiobook, and I tried to set those up for this year just based on the books I had read last year, and I think I'm pretty close in terms of how much I read in terms of pages and audiobook hours. I don't know that I'll set up with this much detail for the next year. I'm very okay just tracking books and not getting into the another level of detail for this one. Another one of my favorites is the reading pace and how many pages my typical book actually usually has. So seeing this breakdown, it's funny to me because it's very clear that I'm smack in the middle. My favorite book is usually around 400 pages, give or take. And this graph really showcases that preference. I think this one shows the nonfiction versus fiction. I'm usually pretty much in the middle, 50-50. Fiction might take over a couple months in a row, and then nonfiction might take a few other months. But I usually have about a 50-50, maybe 60-40 split for fiction and nonfiction, and I really enjoy both. Seeing the breakdown of genres is pretty fun. It's not something I had paid attention to in the past, but all of these make sense to me, both in the nonfiction category as well as the fiction category. And then in this graph where you can see the breakdown of physical book versus Kindle books versus audiobooks, I think this is the year that audiobooks just absolutely took over for me. And I actually think that has a lot to do with crochet. So typically when I am crocheting, instead of listening to music or listening to a YouTube video, I prefer to put on an audiobook. And I am somebody who is able to learn and remember things pretty easily just by listening to it. So audiobooks for me are a really good way to pass the time, not only when I am crocheting, but also when I'm just running errands, right? So if I am grocery shopping or I'm doing dishes, I'm cleaning the home, everything that I do, I can just have my AirPods in and just listening to that audiobook while I do those things. And I'm pretty comfortable paying attention to the story in that way. That being said, it wasn't actually until I looked at this graph, maybe halfway through this year, that I realized how much my reading habits had shifted towards audiobooks. And I am really happy that this has worked out so well for me, because it does mean I can consume more books in different formats and still get that content that otherwise, if I just sit down and grab a book or my Kindle, I wouldn't be able to do as much, because I think you can probably see from the rest of my videos on my channel, I do love to crochet. I'm getting into sewing and knitting. And so I think having that outlet of audiobooks allows me to do both hobbies at the same time, which I think has been incredibly valuable to me. And then at the very bottom, well, second to last here, is my favorite graph of this whole page. This graph shows the month over month, but all the way at the top, you can select just a single month. And then when you come back to this graph, and all of the graphs will actually update to show just that single month, but this graph will, instead of every single month for the year, it will show every single day for the given month that you've selected. So maybe, May 1st through the 31st, and how many pages you read on a Kindle or on hardcover versus how many hours you've listened to an audiobook on a given day. So again, the stats page on StoryGraph is just my absolute favorite part of this app, and it's one that I check basically every single time that I update my stats. And even though I know that things don't change with every single page that I read, it's still a really fun way to see my preferences for reading broken down like this. So that was the first thing that I absolutely love about this app. Let's jump into item number 2. Item number 2 is book editions. So again, this app was truly developed by a voracious reader for readers, right? So the book editions here, it's a really fun way to track which specific edition you are reading, especially if you have the physical copy, not just a Kindle book. So for example, I recently bought Joan of Arc by Mark Twain, and I happened to just get a more uncommon edition than what you would find online. And so being able to track the exact item that you have is just a really fun detail that I think really devoted readers will just enjoy doing. The third thing that I really like about StoryGraph are the recommendations. So the recommendations can be updated at any time, but it's actually based on what you're actively reading, not just the things that you have saved as wanting to read. So for example, you can see that mine, it says that I mainly read fiction books that are emotional, reflective, and adventurous. And they're typically medium paced and between 300 and 500 pages long. And then if you further click into that, you can see the survey that you can update at any time. And those are things that you give a signal to them to generate those recommendations, in addition to what you are actively reading and finishing or not finishing, just as importantly. And then if you look over at the top, you'll see that there's a recommendations button. In the survey, you can click the button that says recommendations, and it'll actually give you a breakdown based on what you've selected. So you'll see the overall recommendations here at the top that you can scroll through, and then each section below that is related to a specific part of the survey that you have selected as liking versus not. So you can also screw those very specific recommendations as well. The fourth item that I really like are the reading challenges. So when I first showed you the stats page, you could see at the top that it had the number of books that you've read versus the goal you've set for the year, the number of pages, and the number of audiobook hours. But there's also reading challenges that are based on themes. In 2022, I signed up for the Read the World Challenge, which was reading 10 books where each book is set in a given country, written by an author from that country. And I found this as a really nice way to just expand my horizons when it comes to reading. So reading different genres, reading about different cultures, reading about different experiences that might not be familiar to me if I haven't read anything from somebody who is from that country. I ended up not signing up for a reading challenge this year in terms of theme, but I think I will probably sign up for one next year. Something around reading my own TBR list, because especially for books that I own, my pile is definitely growing. I am out of shelf space for the books I own. And I find that because I've been gravitating towards audiobooks so much, that I'm going through that pile a little slower than I had expected. So I think next year is going to be the year of just focusing on books that I already own and are right next to my couch that I need to start diving into. And the last thing I'll mention here that is one of my favorite things about StoryGraph is that they have a very small team, right? So they launched in 2019 with just 3 people, and it's still 3 people today. Despite the fact that they have such a small team, they have accomplished so much in just these last few years. And you can actually see what they're focusing their efforts on coming up. So if you scroll all the way down, you'll see a link that says roadmap. If you click on that, you can actually see what they're actively working on. And if you sign up for an account, which is free, you can then propose ideas. You can upvote other people's ideas and suggestions for what they're working on. And it's really cool that Nadia, the founder, keeps this updated so you can actively see what they're working on to launch soon. So for example, I know that she is working on a pause feature, which you can see right here is one of the items that's coming soon. I have personally gone in and voted for a few different things that I am interested in, and it's just such a nice thing to see as somebody who loves this app and sees that they are continuously improving the experience. All right, so we gotta also look at the things that they can work on, and I think they are, right? So based on all of the feedback, they are very, very good at keeping this app up to date. So a couple of things that I would love to see in a future version, or just a brand new feature as well that is now supported. So one, this is a small nitpick, but it really impacts my ability to use StoryGraph on the phone. If you look at the very bottom where the menu bar is, it's so close to the bottom of the screen that sometimes when I go to tap something, I actually accidentally close the app. So I would love to have a few more pixels here at the bottom to just push that menu up a little bit and give us a bit more space for that thumb to just find the right screen. The second item I already mentioned is shown on their roadmap as being actively worked on is the feature to pause a book. Not too long ago, Nadia actually posted on the StoryGraph Instagram account a couple different designs that she's thinking of, asking for feedback and letting us know that she is working on this, and she's just looking for what is the best way to introduce this experience. For me, I tend to pause books when my loan from the library has expired. So sometimes they do expire and there is a wait list, so I need to wait until it's my turn again to get that book again. So it would be really nice for me to be able to pause that book until I actually have access to it again, because otherwise it just keeps counting as if you've been reading for, let's say, 3 months, when in reality, I don't actually have access to that book to be able to read it. So it'll be great when this feature launches where we can just pause in my mind, access to this book, and then once we have it back, be able to unpause it and go back to being able to track how much we're reading on a given day. The third thing I would love to have StoryGraph launch is the ability to save upcoming books. Anytime an author that I like announces that there's a new book coming out, I get really excited, I see the date, and then I completely forget about it. So I would love the ability to go into StoryGraph, put in the title, ISBN, or author name, and just hit like track or something, and that maybe a week before it comes out, it gives me a reminder, or the day before, or something like that, so I don't forget that there is a new book coming out. And also it acts as a way for me to remember that I have to go into Libby tomorrow and place a hold on it. Because depending on the author, some of these new books that come out might take months on the wait list for me to get access to it. So the ability to track an upcoming release and get notified about it ahead of time would be incredibly helpful to me. And the last item I would love to see StoryGraph launch is very similar to my third point of following authors. For some of my favorite authors, I've gone through their catalog of works and just added all of those to my TBR or to a given list. But that doesn't solve the problem that I mentioned earlier of any new books that are coming out are not going to be part of that saved list. It also means that my TBR and my various lists get gigantic, and it's a very unwieldy way to figure out what has come out, what is coming out soon, what is the latest work, what do I already have, what am I in the mood for. And so I end up with just hundreds or thousands of books saved in these lists, and it doesn't actually help me remember which books I want to read by a given author. So those are some of my favorite things about StoryGraph, and a few that I would love to see them improve or launch as brand new features in the future. But again, I really want to give a shout out to this team because there are 3 people working on this app that now has tens, if not hundreds of thousands of users. This is clearly an app that was developed by voracious readers for readers, and it's got some of the most specific things that you would want to track that only readers can truly appreciate the value of. Not only that, they're clearly always working to improve the experience. They're working to handle all of the new users that come in at the beginning of the year. And you can see their roadmap, you can see where your feedback goes and what they are prioritizing. So overall, I am super happy with this app. I use it every single day. I am a volunteer librarian because I love to clean up when there are various editions of the same thing and they're just copied over, and so I'm always cleaning up as I go as well. And I just cannot wait to see what else they launch and how the experience continues to improve over time. So if you have not checked out StoryGraph, I will leave a link to my own page so you can follow me, you can friend me if you would like, and I hope you enjoy tracking your reading. So with that, thank you so much for dropping by, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.